The Traveller's League Book 1 The Timepiece, written by Nick Goss. Hapis. Rain. Cold, drizzling rain quickly soaked Hoops, like a winter storm that somehow made his insides feel wet and chilly. His animal skin shirt didn't help that much. He pulled the hood of his cloak over his head and wrapped himself as best as he could while he tried to find something to stand under. The sky was a blanket of grey clouds that made everything else look the same. Grey, cold, sad and dark. He was in the square of a village or town. All the buildings were identical, made of stone blocks and dark wood trim and beams. The roof of every house was either thatched with straw or shingled with tree bark. Also, every house had a chimney, but not one was smoking. There didn't seem to be any warmth in this place. Beyond the shingled rooftops on the other side of the square, Hoops could see a distant stone tower. The enormous structure dominated everything around it, but it was also simple in its design. A stone cylinder with parapets and ramparts atop. Light shined from some of its tiny stone windows. Hoops had no interest in this world and looked forward to moving on. He pulled out the pocket watch and set it for 10 o'clock, but the hand slid back to 9 o'clock on their own. "Dang it," Hoops mumbled. "I guess I'll just have to do my time here." Wet and miserable, he walked through the town looking for his next adventure. Every street was the same, filled with mud and cobblestone and boring, sad stone houses on both sides. Occasionally, he'd see someone walking on the other side of the street, but he kept his hood on and remained invisible. The people who lived here were fat and flabby, with oversized blobby noses hanging down over their frowning, grumpy faces. Every single citizen of this drab village looked the same, except for the shade of grey tunic each decided to wear that day, or hair which was either shaved entirely or tied back in a black matted ponytail. This was the only way to tell if the person was a male or a female. He had no interest in talking to anyone who lived in this depressing place. He just wanted to find some place warm and dry. Looking at his feet, Hoops rounded the next corner. He didn't notice the dumpy, grumpy fellow coming around the same corner until he ran right into him. When Hoops bounced backwards off the person's fat, flubby tummy, his hood slipped off his head. "Watch where you're going, you little toad turd," the grump bellowed. When he talked, Hoops only noticed a few rotten teeth. The fat of his neck jiggled almost as much as his round, blobby nose. "Little rodents like you should be locked up for just breathing my air on this beautiful day." "Beautiful day? This guy's an idiot." Then he remembered his manners and said, "I'm terribly sorry, sir. Please excuse me." He stepped aside and continued on his way. Behind him he heard Grumpy Pants shout, "Excuse me? Did you say excuse me? How dare you talk to me like that, you little bucket of roach vomit? I'll have you arrested, you hear me?" Hoops was frightened. He didn't know what he'd done wrong. Trying to make peace, he said, "It was an accident, sir. I'm really sorry." "Sir, I'm a woman, you blind little maggot." Hoops hadn't noticed the ponytail. "Hoops, call the guardsman," she yelled across the street. Another grumpy-faced villager hurried off around a corner with a flabby nod of his shaved head. The woman grabbed Hoops by the arm. "You'll learn some respect soon enough." A moment later, the guardsman appeared. He looked the same, except he wore a cone-shaped helmet and a piece of metal hanging down to protect his onion-sized nose. He also carried a spear. The woman explained that Hoops had said, "Excuse me, please," and then called her a "sir." The guardsman grunted and grabbed Hoops, tied his hands behind his back and marched him away. "Please, sir," Hoops begged the guardsman as they walked. "I don't know what I did wrong." "Keep your mouth shut, you little maggot," the guardsman snapped, "or I'll shut it for you." He led Hoops to a main street running directly to the foot of the huge stone tower. They crossed an open drawbridge with 2 guardsmen on each side. They spit on the ground and grimaced at him as he passed. Hoops was led into a round chamber that was empty except for a wooden desk raised several feet by a stone platform. Sitting behind it was an older, uglier, frumpy grump. He wore a white curly wig and black robe. On the wall behind the desk, just above the grumpy judge's head, was a wooden sign that read, "No good deed shall go unpunished." The guardsman explained to the judge what had happened, that Hoops had said, "Excuse me, please, and sir." The judge's frown got deeper and deeper as he listened. His fat, hairy eyebrows raised up before he shouted, "Manners! Here in Hapis! This will not do!" He grabbed his gavel and pointed it at Hoops. "Young man, you have violated the law. You have been charged with committing manners in a public place. The sentence is life in prison." The gavel came down and banged his desk. "Take this maggot away and lock him up with the rest of them," he barked at the guardsman. They escorted Hoops into a small room and took everything away from him. His animal skin shirt, pants, boots, his cloak, the belt and dagger, and the pouch that had the timepiece tucked inside. Luckily, they didn't bother to look in the pouch. They tossed a wadded up bundle of clothes at him and ordered him, "Put this on, you little toad." Hoops unrolled the clothes and slipped on the shirt and pants. They were covered, top to bottom, in vertical black stripes. Between each black stripe was a different colour of the rainbow. It was the first colour Hoops had seen since arriving in the gloomy world, and he loved his new clothes. They were as soft as a fleece blanket, and so warm he didn't even need socks or shoes. He almost said thank you to the guardsman, but realised that it wouldn't end well for him if he did. The guardsman grabbed him by the arm and took him down a long set of stone steps that circled along the tower wall. When they got to his cell, the guardsman pushed Hoops inside and slammed the bars shut. He grunted at Hoops, then waddled back up the stairs. Hoops panicked. He had never been separated from the timepiece before. His only hope was that the grumpy guardsman didn't look through his things. Thinking about home, and his mum and King Tut, he sat on the bed, which was super bouncy and comfy, and cried. The words of the Traveller's Code floated through his mind, and he sang to himself. "It's not an adventure till something goes wrong. You can only be brave when you're scared. Through 4 gates and 5 worlds, by watch or by song, your journey is meant to be shared. Adventures are wasted on those who don't learn. Adventures must come to their ends, but there's always another one round the next curve, and in the Traveller's Rest you'll find friends. So cheer up, young traveller, adventure awaits. The timepiece has chosen you to roam, and no matter the time or where you go next, at 6:30 you'll always come home." "That's a beautiful song," a voice called from the hallway. It was a woman's voice. "Who's there?" Hoops whispered. "I'm Myra." He jumped up and leaned his head against the bars, looking down the hallway. All the other cells were along the wall like his and faced the same direction. They were arranged in such a way that inmates couldn't see each other. "How do I get out of here?" "Shh, not so loud," Myra warned, "or the frumps will hear you." Hoops whispered this time. "How do I get out of this place?" "Well, if I knew that, I wouldn't still be here, would I?" Myra giggled. "Let's talk tomorrow at lunch. I'll introduce you to everyone. Get some sleep, traveller." "How do you know I'm a traveller, Myra?" "Myra, how do you know I'm a traveller?" His whispers were answered with silence. He curled up on his bed and slipped his blanket over his shoulders. It was like lying on a warm fleece cloud. Sleep came instantly and brought no dreams. When he awoke, his body was refreshed and his mind clear. He took note of everything he'd seen and heard in hopes that he could formulate a plan to retrieve the timepiece. After about an hour of quiet, concentrated planning, Hoops heard the heavy plod, plod, plod of footsteps and the jingle of keys. The guardsman unlocked his cell and grunted, "Ah!" Hoops obeyed as the guardsman grabbed him by the arm and escorted him to the dining chamber. There was a big rectangular room on the floor below the cells. 10 rows of long wooden tables stretched from the back all the way up to the entrance, where a line of rainbow-striped people stood quietly in line. They waited to receive their bowl of grub, whispering to each other as they watched the guardsman lead the new kid to the back of the line. "Don't make trouble or noise." The guardsman let go and shuffled out of the room. Strange, the guardsmen leave the room and don't monitor the inmates as they talk and eat. When his turn came and he was finally at the front of the line, he took a wooden bowl from atop a big stack and held it out in front of him. The frumpy grump serving the grub had a ponytail covered with a fishnet and wore an apron that was once white. She filled her ladle with a lumpy-looking soup and plopped it into his bowl. "Next!" she barked. Hoops looked over the rows of tables for a spot to sit by himself. He didn't want to take someone else's favourite spot and make trouble with any of the other prisoners, though he didn't think it was likely any mean people were actually kept prisoner here. Everyone seemed quite normal and polite. People smiled at each other and whispered, "Good morning," and "Hello," and "Excuse me." Hoops even heard one prisoner say, "Thank you, buddy," to another. This place is bizarre. Out of the corner of his eye, someone waved. It was a red-headed woman looking directly at him. When he turned his head towards her, she motioned for him to sit next to her. As he set the bowl on the table and sat down, she said quietly, "You did well not to say thank you to the cook. She would have thrown her ladle at you." "Are you Myra?" Hoops asked the redhead. She was a beautiful woman about his mum's age, maybe a little younger, and her smile was friendly and warm. "That's right. I'm in the cell next to yours, and you are Hoops," he said. "Pleased to meet you." As they talked, another 3 inmates sat in front of them across the table. 3 grown men with smiles, manners, and an interest in meeting the new kid and hearing his story. "These are my friends, Hoops. This is Doc," Myra said, pointing to an older, bald man with glasses. He didn't have any facial hair, and the wrinkles around his face told Hoops he was wise and kind. "This is Jonathan," she continued. Jonathan was a younger, muscular man with a thick black beard, a scar on his forehead, and a playful mischief in his eyes. "And this is Chase," she finished. Chase was a thin, tall teenager with straight, jet-black hair, brown eyes, and thick black glasses. "My name is Stephen, but it took the Frumps a week to catch me, so Chase is my nickname. It was quite a week. Never ran so much in my life. Their fat legs don't let them run very fast." Chase seemed like a cool older kid. "Tell us about your travels, son." Doc leaned close and slurped his soup. "How did you know I'm a traveller?" "Are you going to eat that?" Jonathan interrupted. "It's not as good once it's cold." Hoops took a sip of his soup and found it was delicious. It was like a homemade stew of beef, vegetables and sweet spices. He was so confused. Prison food was supposed to be gross. Prison beds were supposed to be hard. Prison clothes were supposed to be itchy. And prisoners were supposed to be mean and dangerous. Everything is backwards here. I almost like being in prison. Myra spoke. "You're not the first traveller we've met, Hoops. We get them in here all the time. I think it's part of their journey. We help them escape, and they all say the same thing. I'll come back and set you free, but they never do. They never come back. But a new one always comes along and makes the same promise." Hoops remembered saying the same thing to Duin when he left Siribaz. The look of sad memories was obvious to their inmates. "It's okay, kid," Jonathan reassured him. "We love to help the travellers. Whether they come back or not, it gives us something fun to do." and it drives the Frumps crazy when they can't figure out how someone escaped. Chase obviously loved to play tricks on the Frumps. Watch this. He jumped up with his empty bowl and walked to the front of the line. How about another bowl of that pig vomit you call food, you hag? He shouted at the cook. She smiled at the insult and scooped another giant ladle of stew and plopped it in his bowl. Returning to his seat, he said, You got to know how to talk to the Frumps to get what you want. You have to have the opposite of manners. Hoops was impressed. Can you guys help me get my stuff back? He hoped they would help one more traveller make his escape. Of course, Doc smiled. Your stuff is locked up in the warden's office. We just need to sneak you in there. Then we can get you to the tunnel. Hoops felt alive with hope. There's a tunnel.